Welcome once again to Let's Talk Marriage. This is Pastor Larry coming to you this Wednesday afternoon with Let's Talk Marriage. All right. We're going to get right on into our subject matter on today. Our subject on today is overcoming disagreements in a marriage. So many marriages suffer from constant bickering or arguing, and it's usually over the same thing, or it seems to never get resolved. We're going to be talking about some of the things you might want to listen or open your ears or open your heart to some of the things that I came across in my studies on disagreements within a marriage, because there's so many marriages that are some even break up over disagreements that's never resolved. And again, if you have not had closure on things in your past, that can certainly be a reason to have disagreements in a marriage. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are reaching some kind of resolution or some kind of agreement in our marriage instead of a disagreement. I ran across an article in Psych Central on it had several ways of how to overcome a disagreement in a marriage. Let me read some of this here. It says some marriage conflicts never seem to be resolved. Well, I just mentioned that. It's just constantly arguing over and over and over. And it's usually about the same thing. This situation leaves couples arguing about the same thing, what I just said, over and over again. But things do not have to be this way. Most conflicts can be resolved if constant process is followed, or a consistent process is followed. While these steps may seem time consuming at first, in the end they are saving countless hours of exhausting arguing and avoiding. One of the things that they mention here is environment rules and boundaries begin. The discussion is a neutral territory, such as a restaurant. I had mentioned it once before. You meet in a neutral place, and sometimes it might be even good to, especially if there's serious disagreements, you might want to bring in a certified third party or a third party that's capable of listening neutrally. You don't. In other words, you want to bring in a parent or something, because naturally, most of the time they're going to side with either one or the other. So you don't want to bring a parent in. So you might want to bring in, like, for instance, you might want to bring in if you have a pastor that's real good at resolving conflicts, or real good at confrontational things, you might want to bring him in. Here's another one here on here. It says, decide on no. Okay, here it is. I've mentioned this a lot of times too. Set a limit. Focus on one problem. You can't bring in just number of things that's going wrong and expect not the conversation to escalate, or the disagreement to escalate by you bringing in several different things that happen. Focus on one thing and resolve the one thing at a time. And basically, what I've been saying all along is it's based on listening. You have to learn to listen. And if we're not listening, it never gets anywhere if you're not listening. So you have to make sure that we are listening to each other when we are going through certain things in our marriage and certain conflicts in our marriage. Here, let me finish this number one here. Decide on no name calling. Belittling. I mentioned that you can't start belittling the other party, because it's going to escalate if you start doing it. Belittling of ideals or manipulative behavior. You can't be trying to dominate the person and try to get them to do what you want them to do. That's always going to continue in the argument. Agree on the problem. Each should describe the problem as they see it. Then look for a larger issue and any underlying fears and needs. Pick one battle at a time. Again, you can't bring in several different discussions when you're trying to discuss one subject. In other words, you can't bring up something else. And that's how you start bringing up things of the past, because you felt like you weren't winning the argument. So you start bringing up something else that didn't even have anything to do with what you're talking about from the other person's past. So we have to make sure that we are staying focused on the one subject when we are trying to discuss things, and make sure you have an open heart and open ears. Make sure you are listening, because I've said it several times. It's hard to argue with a person if you're listening to them. And once you listen to them, you might get a better understanding. You definitely will get a better understanding what the situation is or what they're trying to say to you. Because sometimes it's hard to bring up a subject, and I've mentioned that several times too. You have to make sure you pick the right time. That's why they mentioned in here about a neutral place. Make sure you pick the right time. And if the situation starts to get to the point where somebody is getting loud, or one of you is getting loud, by all means, or never say, calm down, never say that, or oh, you need to hold your voice down, because then it's going to escalate to something that's a whole nother argument there. You talk loud too. So, so you want to make sure that you both are listening to each other, and find out, you don't discuss nothing in the midst of one argument, again, bringing up something else. Let's see what else they have here. Gather information. You make sure you gather information. Make sure your information is right. That don't mean you bring up things for the past. Just bring up information that going to support what you're trying to say, not to throw it in their face. Let's see what else here. Negotiate work towards a collaborative solution by being hard on the problem and soft on the person. You address the problem not by yelling at the person or your spouse that you're trying to discuss something with. And so many couples just getting, some couples argue all the time. You can't, they argue in public places, they argue at home, they argue in private places. They just argue all the time. And it affects the family when you argue like that, especially if you have children, because children react or act out what they see at home. If they see you constantly bickering and arguing, when they go to school, they're going to be argumentative with the teacher. They're going to be argumentative with their friends. You don't want to let your children see that you are arguing, And nowadays you can't tell them, oh, your mom and dad are having a discussion, We ain't arguing, we just discussing, And you both yelling at each other. They're going to yell at somebody and say, I ain't arguing, I'm just discussing. So you have to make sure that we are relaying our messages the best way that we can, and with compassion, because you can't go into argument already. I'm gonna tell you off. I'm gonna give you a piece of my mind. You can't go into a discussion thinking you gonna get a person a piece of your mind. And so many times we use that phrase. I'm gonna give them a piece of my mind. I'm gonna tell you where I'm coming from. And by all means, don't start bringing other people in the argument. Don't start name calling and mention about belittling people. Don't belittle a person. Don't just putting each other down, because then you start putting each other down, and then escalate into something else. And don't bring in another subject when you're discussing one subject. If you're having an argument about, for instance, if you have an argument about your husband not washing the dishes, you don't bring up the fact that he don't open a door for you. Well, what's that got to do with that? That's a whole different subject. Because then when you start bringing up one thing that doesn't have anything to do with that, then the other party gonna feel like they need to have something to bring up something that you did that's not being discussed. So you don't want to start bringing up things like that. My wife and I, we have disagreements at sometimes, but when we first got married, we had more disagreements. But I'm not the type of person. I'm not argumentative at all, so I don't really be arguing with her. But when it's time to discuss things, I try to discuss it, and I try to it's sometimes, like, again, it's not that easy. Sometimes you want to discuss something with someone, but you're trying to figure out a way of how you're going to discuss it with them. So that's why you have to be very careful. Excuse me. You have to be very careful on how you discuss things with people. You don't want to be trying to overshadow them. You don't want to try to over talk them. Just because you over talk someone don't mean that you got your point across. Because when you over talk people, only thing you do is just get them all riled up. You don't want to get nobody all riled up, and then no one gets anywhere. That's why people constantly have arguments over the same thing and just going on and on and on about the same thing. So you have to learn to listen to the other person, because if you don't listen, then you will take what they said the wrong way, or you might not catch the meaning of what they're trying to say. Because if you listen to someone, they might not be able to get it out there the way you think they should, but you'll understand what they're trying to say. But if you're not listening to it, you're going to take it a whole different way, and then you're going to react a whole different way. So we want to make sure, especially people that are Christian or children of God or saints, and it seems like the worst days, or the days that they have the most arguments, is usually on Sunday morning. You can always tell when you pull up at the light, you look over in the next car, and the other person looking out one window while the other one's driving. They in an argument. And he'll pull off real fast, and because somebody running late and stuff. So you have to make sure that we are. So sometimes it's always good to agree to disagree. You might not always agree with someone, but sometimes it's good to agree to disagree, because you don't have to always win an argument. You have some people that are out there that always have to be right, always have to have the last say. You don't always have to have the last say. Now, that's why I told you, and for one thing, please don't say, I told you so. Didn't I tell you? You don't want to go that route, because then when you say I told you, then they want to say, well, just like that time I told you, you didn't listen. So you don't want to do that. Then you know what? Your kids will start doing that too. When you tell them one thing, then they got to be argumentative. You know why they argumentative? Because they see you being argumentative with daddy. They see mama being argumentative with daddy. So when mama tell them something to do, then they gonna be argumentative. So you don't want that to relay that bad start of bad behavior with your children, because then it's going to go off. When they go to school, they're going to be arguing with the teacher. Teacher tell them to do something, then they got to have an excuse, or they're going to be arguing. I did the homework and it's right. I know it's. So don't have those heated discussions in front of your children. Don't try not to do that, please, because that really affects our children. And that's why a lot of children are acting out in schools. They're bringing weapons to school because they see all this stuff at home. You want to make sure that they see a loving environment at home. And when they see a loving environment at home, that's how they're going to, when they grow up, that's how they know that's how you're supposed to treat your spouse. Because if they see you being argumentative all the time, when they grow up, when they get into a relationship, that's all they're going to do. They're going to do the same thing. They're going to be argumentative all the time, always want to be right, can't take criticism, Some folks, if you give them constructive criticism, but the thing about constructive criticism, you have to know how and when to say it. because you can give something that might be constructive, but you can give it at the wrong time. You don't want to give it in the middle of an argument. You do that when when you both are having a regular conversation, but you don't do that in the middle of an argument. Trying to correct, because they feel like you're trying to correct. I'm grown. I'm way past 21. Get into one of those discussions like that. So you want to make sure that we are in a agree to disagree sometimes, because again, you don't always have to be right. And even if you're right, that don't mean you have to be so voice your opinion all the time. Sometimes you can keep your opinion to yourself, because if it's not the right time, but it's always a time to do things, and there's always a time to say things. And when you say things at the right time, everything flows, and you'll find out that the arguments that you've been having have not, they'll start to diminish. You won't have as many arguments, and when you have a discussion, it'll be something simple, not anything serious. If you're having discussions with your husband and you're always arguing and you can't seem to reach a solution, make sure you seek some kind of counseling. I always say that get a third party involved, that a neutral, let me say it again, neutral third party. Because if you get someone on your side, you don't want to get nobody on your side, because then it's two people coming against them, and so make sure that you get that neutral party, and especially if you know a couple that's been married a long time, and you watch them. That's why you have to watch what you say, what you do as a married couple, especially though if you've been married for a while. Make sure people see the good things. You can tell them that your marriage is not perfect. You have discussions. Sometimes you don't always agree, and sometimes you might have disagreements. But you have solutions, and you know what to do in the midst of those disagreements. So make sure you find that couple or counselor that's been there. They know that's been married a long time. Because if you find someone that's been married a long time, trust me, they've seen it all. They've been in those places, and sometimes some of the things that they've been through might be even really serious. Some of them might have been through a relationship where someone was unfaithful or things of that nature, and they know what to tell you, how to react, what you should do, or not what you should do, but suggestions, or give you an ideal, or how to handle that. Because sometimes some of the arguments or discussions can be very serious, and some discussions are so serious they lead to divorce and separation and things of that nature. So before it get to that point, make sure that you are sitting down, talking with each other and discussing things, because you don't want to. Because when you as a couple, especially if you're in church, trust me, people know when you've had a little argument between the both of you. People gonna know. You try to play it off and like everything's okay. People will pick it up, especially if they see you as a couple that always seem to be getting along, always have it together and stuff. They'll know right away when something's not right. So make sure that we are talking to each other and discussing things, and you can get past your disagreements. You can get past those arguing, and where everything flows smoothly in the household, and where your children will pick it up, and when they go to school, they have a better attitude. They're not thinking, you walk around saying, you women, they just something else. Can't live with them. Can't live without them. You don't want your young men to have that thought process in their mind, because they'll think that all women are just bickering, just chatterboxes and bicker all the time. And they look at their teacher and that, look at their female classmates that way, and then when they get older and get on the job, then they look at their female supervisors that way. It all rolls downhill. So you have to make sure that when you are having these discussions, that you reach a good solution, where you're not having a whole bunch of issues. You're not arguing over the same thing all the time. And when you get to a point once you get past and learn to listen and everything. The next time you have a disagreement, it'll just be a discussion and not an argument. And that's what you want to do. You want to discuss and not argue, because argument could lead to other things, other negative things in your marriage. This is Pastor Wilson. I'm going to be signing off with Let's Talk Marriage until we meet again. And we'll see you on next Wednesday. This is Pastor Larry saying, Let's Talk Marriage. Now remember, all the music that you hear on this station, all the music that you might hear on this station is from a wonderful app called Whoop Triggers Plus. It's a wonderful app for those that churches, group settings, or podcasts that you want that Christian music in there. It's awesome, for the churches that don't have musicians right now. So look it up, Whoop Triggers Plus. This is Pastor Larry signing off until we meet again with Let's Talk Marriage.